Yes. 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 Thank you. Oh no, please stop. Sit down. You're too kind. You're too kind. The applause is too much. It's overwhelming. Hey, how are you?
Hello, I'm well, thank you.
Good. Nice.
How are
Nice.
you?
Looking forward to a great conversation tonight. I want to welcome all of our viewers, our listeners. My name is Jason Wallace, and I am the Director of Business Solutions at EatOkra. And on behalf of EatOkra, we would like to thank you for registering for the third of four educational webinars executive produced by EatOkra. This educational webinar series is designed to empower emerging and established Black restaurateurs, food trucks, and caterers. Tonight's session is part 2 of digital marketing and PR methods for telling your brand story. But before we get started, let me tell you a little bit about EatOkra. EatOkra is the go-to app for discovering Black-owned restaurants nationwide. Where food, culture, and community link, EatOkra has connected over 300,000 foodies to culinary creators and restaurateurs like yourself. So again, we want to thank you for viewing. At EatOkra, we help restaurateurs and food truck owners discover methods to grow and scale their business by producing and providing access to industry experts and leaders like you're going to have tonight. Now, if you are a Black-owned restaurant and you need to get listed, go to EatOkra, the app. If you're an existing EatOkra member and you have questions about your existing EatOkra membership or about how to become a member, please contact Kevin Edwards, our customer success manager, at his email address, and that is kevin@eatokra.com. Again, that's kevin@eatokra.com. So as we continue to produce these educational webinars, we want you to tell a friend and bring a friend. Tell your colleagues all about EatOkra. And just so you'll know, throughout the month of April, we have been having these educational seminars, webinars, to reveal methods to grow and scale your businesses with industry professionals. This particular month's focus has been on Washington, D.C. metro area. And together we'll cover everything from participating in culinary incubators, pop-up events, effective brand storytelling, and getting the best out of your partnerships with third-party delivery platforms such as Uber Eats, which will be next week. So make sure that you register for each session. Next week's session is free registration. Let me say that again. It's free registration. It's free registration. It's free. It's free. It's free. It's free. We're giving you college-level curriculum education. We're giving you industry experts for free. So please, again, tell a friend, bring a friend. None of this would be possible without our partners, which includes PepsiCo, Uber Eats, and Dashable.com. And we would love to thank Apple Guides for their collaboration on the Apple Guides that we've done with them, and be on the lookout for more guides to come. So without any further ado, let's talk about tonight's discussion. Tonight is part 2 of digital marketing and PR methods for storytelling and brand development. And today we are blessed and pleased to have from the DC metro area, founder and principal of Savor PR, Charissa Benjamin. Yeah. You like that? Say with Benjamin, Charissa Benjamin. Hey, Charissa.
Hello.
How are you?
If only I could have that kind of intro everywhere I go.
There you go. Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. So let's jump right into it. Tell our viewers and our listeners about yourself, how you got started, and what your brand brings to the table.
Sure. So I'm Charissa Benjamin. Thank you again for the intro. I run and own a small restaurant PR boutique agency in Washington, D.C. called Savor PR. I founded the business this October would make 9 years. And we work primarily with restaurants and chefs in the D.C. area. But we've had certainly worked beyond the immediate area. So we've had some great opportunities to work on projects a little further afield in Charlottesville. I'm originally from Antigua in the Caribbean, so I still have my roots there. A lot of my family is there, so I've had a good chance to work on some projects back home as well, which is nice.
Okay.
But in general, we do work mostly with food and restaurant and chef projects in the region. And before founding the business, I was the in-house PR director for Kimpton Hotels and Restaurants, and so oversaw the restaurant division's PR efforts in the Mid-Atlantic region.
Wow. See that, people? I tell you, we bring the best and brightest minds to you for free here at EatOkra. Ding, that's right. We're going to drop a lot of bombs here tonight in terms of knowledge and nuggets of information. So, Charissa, what do PR managers do?
It's like one of those questions that I think it's kind of this nebulous feel. I think a lot of people, if you ever, and I think it's because I grew up in the Caribbean, so we used to watch a lot of BBC shows. There was this show called Absolutely Fabulous. Okay. And I remember a restaurant manager said to me once, well, I know what you PR people do. I watched Absolutely Fabulous. And I'm like, no, PR people do not run around and, with clipboards. Yes, some of them do, and throw wonderful parties. And yes, that's part of the job at some points. But, in general, it's a pretty broad, it's a broad aspect, but I think a lot of what we do is very focused on managing your brand in the public sphere. And so, particularly, we work a lot with the media and helping to tell your story and communicate that with the media, and helping to raise your awareness and awareness of who you and our clients are in some of the more influential media outlets that exist. So whether that's TV, newspapers, radio, we work to get mentions and to increase your press presence.
Got it. And what does a restaurant need to have before they contact someone like yourself?
So I think, if you have a restaurant that's up and running, I think that you can certainly stand to benefit from using PR. And obviously that is, I'm going to say that because I run a restaurant PR company, right?
Right, exactly.
But I think ultimately, if a lot of clients come to us and say, hey, we're opening up a restaurant and we need your help. We want people to learn about who we are. And we want, as soon as we open our doors, to get people coming in here. And I always say, no, those jobs are actually the easiest jobs. As restaurant owners, we know that opening up a restaurant is not easy. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of late nights, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears.
Right.
But from a PR perspective, it's much easier because everybody wants to write about something that is new. And so that is your hook, that is your angle. The more challenging and frankly fun projects for us is when a restaurant comes to us and says, hey, we've been open for the past 15 years. We are not the new kid on the block anymore. And we want to be relevant. We want people to be talking about us. And so, what do you have to have? You have to have an up and running restaurant and have a story that is compelling. And I think everybody has a compelling story. You just need to work hard to sort of peel back those layers and understand why you are different and why people should care about your restaurant. Got it.
So tell me, what's the difference between PR and advertising, right? And what's the pros and cons of PR? Do I control it versus an advertisement, which I know I can control exactly what's going out there?
Yeah. So I'll say one of the biggest differences is that you pay to advertise. And obviously you pay for PR as well, right. But you pay a lot of money to place a lot of ads, whether that is on TV, on radio, in print, online. They cost money. They're not cheap. So there's that. And in order for them to also be effective, you need to be advertising a lot. You need to be advertising in many places and doing it on a consistent basis. So there's that. The difference, I'd say that's one of the biggest differences. Right. You don't really get to, you get to control your message from an advertising perspective.
Right.
But when it comes to PR, you do have to you do control the message that you put out there, but the final result of what runs in the media, whether it's, a TV piece or something that's on online, is something that you don't get full control over. But I would say that one of the biggest things, and hopefully, not to get political, hopefully this hasn't been too eroded over, when you look at sort of the last administration who ran this country, who eroded a lot of trust within media, is that advertising, it definitely builds exposure, but PR is something that builds trust. And, I think people read something in the news and hopefully they trust and believe it a little bit more because they know that, they hopefully understand and realize that the press is free and free in the sense of in how it operates. And so it does tend to be more trustworthy. I think, we tell a lot of our clients that, we don't recommend advertising for restaurants because in order for it to be effective, you have to do it so often. And it gets really costly, like I said, but that people tend to trust a message of, here is a list of, 5 restaurants that a leading food critic or food writer is going to recommend, or a leading publication is going to recommend because they like it, versus, this restaurant paid to tell me to come into their restaurant. You don't necessarily trust it as much.
Got you. What would be the different strategies that you would recommend to a startup restaurant versus a restaurant that has been in business, say, for 2 to 3 years? Because I've seen where the initial grand opening, there's, it's a buzz, people want to come and they want to, they're just going to come one time. And then I've seen the numbers, because I'm a numbers guy. I watch, my restaurant clients, where you'll get that spike for year 1 and 2, but you really don't know where your flat line is until year 3. And there needs to be, I'm assuming, a different strategy for those. So can you, because we have viewers out there that have food trucks, that are caterers, that are, startup restaurants, and everybody's kind of, even though you may have been in business, there's now a post-COVID world that, it's almost like, all right, it's a relaunch. Yeah. So can you just give us a high-level walkthrough of how you would approach a startup versus a rebrand of an existing restaurant that may have been around for 3 years or so?
Yeah, so I think, like I said a little bit earlier, we like to say that launching and announcing the restaurant's easy, right? And it's, again, not for the operator, but from a press perspective, right? So our strategy is really about sort of helping to craft what your message and your story is. Give the nuggets of the who, the what, the where, the when, why people, again, should care. What is your story, and what makes you different and separate from everyone else? And we really do sort of help sort of blanket the media as much as we possibly can with that message, so that people really are our hope is that when we help launch a restaurant, that every publication that matters has written about that. So people are saying, hey, I read about XYZ in this place. I saw it on the radio, on the TV. I heard about them on the radio. And so I think it's very much a saturation strategy in the beginning. It's really just sort of like, how do we help to build that buzz? But like you said, going into year 2, year 3, it is, okay, you don't have that newness anymore. And so for a lot of what we do, we like to tell our clients that we want to sort of get our heads into the operations. And so what are the types of promotions that are effective for your business? And I've seen over the years that there are a lot of promotions that will get restaurants a ton of press, but it doesn't necessarily get butts in seats for them. And so is it helping to build awareness? Yes. But if you want to see something drive awareness as well as sales and revenue, then what does that look like for your restaurant? And so for a lot of what we've done, it's it's really thinking through, what is your brand story? Who are some of the partners in the local community that you can get together with, whether it is, a chef pop-up, or, tapping into a special promotion or a special menu item, and really trying to think creatively about the new things that you can be doing, but not necessarily New, yes, but not new to the point where it's creating too much work for you. So is it something as simple as finding a local florist who is doing beautiful work and partnering with them on Mother's Day, for instance, to do like, brunch and flowers to go if you're not sort of open in a post-COVID world.
Right.
And so I think really just thinking creatively about, again, what ties back to your brand story, what makes sense for you, and looking for not necessarily, I'm not a new restaurant anymore, but what is something new that I can be putting out there that will get people talking about what we're doing, and something that's interesting and timely.
Got you. So in terms of, I'm a restaurateur, what are my expectations of some of the deliverables that I should expect when I'm either interviewing or hiring a PR firm?
So it's going to vary from firm to firm. I would definitely be sure to ask important questions like, how often will we be meeting? Will you be helping me to create a communications plan that's really going to help me map out all of these things like, promotions that we're going to be doing? Are you going to help us with, either building out a press kit if we don't have one already, or looking at the assets that we already have to help promote our restaurant, to take a look at how could we fine tune those or make them better? In addition to, those sort of more tactical things like how often are we meeting? Are you going to be sending a plan? Are you going to be, giving me activity reports? And I do think that I would be wary in sort of asking for activity reports, because I've worked at very big agencies that, spin a lot of wheels where they're, putting out Excel spreadsheets of like what every single intern who worked on this project did, every phone call they made, if they left a voice message. And frankly, that's just nonsense work that's not going to really, at the end of the day, give you what you need, right? It's like, I think that's, I would be wary of those things. I would also ask, how do they bill? A lot of agencies do charge hourly. We personally don't. And honestly, we don't think that is the best way for restaurants where margins are as slim as they are. Right. To be billing hourly. So I would certainly ask for a sort of like, what does a fee schedule look like, and what does that involve? Right.
And normally, how long are these contracts or agreements?
So I've heard some agencies not take on projects unless it's like a minimum of a year. I personally think that's a stretch for a lot of restaurants. I think, you have restaurants that are in two camps. There are some restaurants who are like, I get PR, I understand that I need it, and I am willing and able and want to dedicate my time to that. And then there are others who are a little bit hesitant. And so you have to sort of like walk in on a little bit easier. I personally think that anything less than 6 months does not set the agency and the restaurant up for the most success, because I think there's a lot of work that goes in to understanding a brand and helping to build awareness. But then also, I've worked on so many projects that were, 6-month long retainers. And then, 3 months after we ended the contract, you get a call from Food and Wine magazine that says, hey, I know you pitched me that and followed up 55,000 times, but we're actually interested in running this story now, or looking at it from a different angle. And so, a lot of it is a lot of planting seed work, which is, it's a slow process, and it doesn't necessarily, result in immediate dividends, if you will. And so it does, I would, if there is a budget to have it, I would certainly recommend looking for a partner that you can find who sort of truly becomes sort of a part of your team, if you will, and understands your mission and your brand, and helps you build things for the long run. Right.
So how do you manage expectations, and how do you define success?
So that's, two parts to that. Manage expectations is sort of half of what we're doing a lot of the time.
Right, exactly.
But, when we start with a lot of our clients, it's, we have sort of like a kickoff meeting that we have with all of our clients. And we have sort of a long list of questions. Is like Some of our clients are like, really, this is, we're an hour and a half in here. And it's like, no, but we really do want to understand your brand and help set those expectations. And so a lot of the times, like one of the first questions is, what does success look like for you?
Mm-hmm.
We want to understand what it looks like from a business perspective, but also from a PR perspective. Because if some clients come in and say, hey, I just want to get on more lists. I want, I see such and such on this list of like, best restaurants.
Heads up, there's smoke in the kitchen. The alarm may sound. It's going to be loud.
Someone's cooking in my kitchen and clearly making a mess. I hope the house won't burn down.
Wow.
I think that it's understanding what that success looks like from the get-go, from the client's perspective is most important, from the business side and also from the press side. Because, if somebody comes in and says, hey, I want to get on more lists, that's great. That's something that's achievable. If someone comes in and says, hey, I want to be on the cover of the New York Times food section, and I'm not saying it's not achievable, it's just going to take a little bit of work and a different strategy to get there.
Got it.
And I've always been one to say, hey, you're not going to get to that place with this message, but we're going to have to tweak it if you want to, if that's the path that you want to go down.
Got it. So it sounds like you're a one-stop shop because you craft messages, you do the wordsmithing and the crafting of the message based upon their brand, their story. You create the story and then tell it. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I would be careful in saying, that I craft a message. I certainly help to develop a story and I take that idea and I try and find the most suitable writers and media outlets that would make sense for coverage and sort of use that to pitch an idea and pitch a story.
Got it. Okay. So let me ask you this. How can restaurant owners prepare for potential PR opportunities?
So I always say that there are some really key assets that you need, whether, if you're going to hire a PR company or not. There are a couple of tools that we really feel that you need to have. Either you get done on your own or hire somebody to do it. It's really just building out a very thoughtful, smart press kit. A lot of the times journalists will come to you with a last minute opportunity because everybody is always on deadline.
And deadlines, right?
Yeah. And those, I've had people come to me and be like, my deadline's in the next 2 hours. And, that's, when you ask, what does the day of a publicist look like? It's that, you sort of set off, well, I'm going to do this today. And then, you change gears every 5 minutes because someone needs something and everyone has an emergency. So you have to be prepared for those things, because if they don't get what they want from you at that point, they will move on to the next person. And, your competition is going to get that press coverage. So I would definitely ensure that you have a smart, thoughtfully written bio on the owners or the key personalities who are behind your restaurant.
Okay.
I would have a sort of 1 paragraph just sort of synopsis on what the restaurant is. What do you serve? Again, like think about it from a journalist perspective. Why should I care and why should my readers care? So what are you serving? What are you offering? What is different and unique? Why would people want to come into my space? And I can't stress this enough. And I know Anela touched on this yesterday. Really, really good photography. It's so helpful, and it's something that you can use for social media, but also something that you can use for press requests when they come through. Oftentimes people want to have, if you're putting out either a release on your new menu or a special partnership that you're doing, if you have photo assets to go along with that, it just goes a long way. And really wonderful if you can make the lead because you have a really well done photo. So those I would say are the 3 key pieces. And in that boilerplate where we talk about sort of what the restaurant is, make sure that you include the key information, like where can you find me? So your physical address, but also your online presence. So your website, all of your social media handles, and yes, phone numbers, because people still call restaurants, as we know.
Right, absolutely. I just want to speak to the viewers to encourage them to put their questions in the chat. We have a brilliant mind here. We have a seasoned professional. So please, utilize this opportunity to pick her brain and to ask her questions. So put those questions in the chat. We are monitoring the chat.
Hey, Jason, we have a question in the chat from Alicia.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Alicia asks Charissa, what if the owner doesn't want to be the person behind the brand? Sort of like we don't know the CEO of Target or Whole Foods. They have others talking about their brands and not necessarily them. How can this be achieved?
Yeah, it's a great question. I just saw that pop up, Alicia. It's a great question, and I think that it's something that we've seen where you have sort of one set of restaurants who are like, put me front and center, whether it's the owner or the chef, and others who are like, just, I put out good food, and that's really all I want to be part of the story. And I think what's important is to find what that specific selling point and story is, right? So, you don't have to be front and center. You may have to be interviewed for a story, but you can find ways to highlight messaging that talks more about the brand and what you are doing. And again, what makes you unique, what makes you different. And you can sort of, as the owner or chef or whoever it may be, sort of take a sort of behind the scenes position on it. And that would also mean, not necessarily going after more forward-facing opportunities like TV and radio, because that would mean that somebody has to speak. And so trying to find, who would make sense for that. And, I work with a client that doesn't love to do TV and radio and doesn't want the brand to be about them. And so we've found creative ways to work around that. But if, a TV crew calls and says, hey, we want to come down for a National Donut Day, you sell great donuts, a lot of the times we'll work with the store manager or somebody who's working the checkout register, who is more open with going on TV and helping them with media questions and things that might pop up. But there are ways that you can work around it where you don't have to be front and center.
Great question. Any other questions currently in the chat, Kev?
Alicia actually had a follow-up. She said, thanks, Kevin. I struggle with this. Was once told I would sell more popcorn if I put my picture out on IG. The funny thing is I sell popcorn without my picture, and women are my largest customers. The comment came from a male.
Well, I mean, what I will say is that I don't think your picture needs to be on there if you don't want it to be on there, first and foremost. But I will also say, if people know that your business is a woman-owned business, they do not need to see a picture of who is, behind that. They might be more willing and open and eager to support your business. So I wouldn't underscore sort of, I wouldn't say it would be a terrible thing to highlight the aspects of your business that would encourage people to continue supporting you. But again, you can do that without putting your name and your picture front and center on your website.
Charissa, is there a different strategy for TV versus print?
Yes. I will say that from a print perspective, you have a lot more opportunities, but you look at it from a different angle depending on what the publication is. Magazines are a little bit trickier because they work on really, really long deadlines. And so again, this is hard for restaurants because you're like, you want me to think about Thanksgiving, like I can barely think about like what's happening next week, right? So right. In order to get it, if a goal is to get into more magazine outlets, you do have to think with a longer vision in mind. And so really thinking through, okay, well, what could I be doing at my restaurant for for this opportunity, so that you can have different ideas to pitch to media with 4 to 6 months notice, which I know is ridiculous, but that is kind of how they're working. For newspapers, it's a little bit different. Their deadlines are shorter, but again, it's are you looking at trying to pitch an interesting recipe? Are you looking at just trying to get onto a calendar of things to do, or the best places to have barbecue in town? And those are a little bit different. You can certainly pitch for consideration, but print has a lot more. There are a lot more opportunities there. TV is different from the sense that, like, TV producers, I love them, but TV news producers are sometimes like the shortest lead, most last minute, I'm coming down there in an hour kind of situation. And it's like, no. So for TV, things definitely work differently. You either have to be prepared to drop everything at a moment's notice and make it happen, or again, think ahead and maybe pitch some ideas in advance of, like, do you want to come down and, like, see my, I don't know, like, do a food demo on my July 4th menu, or whatever that might be. But you're looking at, you can probably get away with pitching a TV story with less than a week's notice, because they work on such short cycles. And also, you can appreciate this, they're at the mercy of breaking news as well. So you could be teed up to do something where they're like, hey, I'm coming down here tomorrow, but if the verdict of one of the most controversial cases of our time and important cases of our time is dropped at the same time, then that TV piece is likely not going to happen.
Right. So I'm going to go here. EatOkra is clearly supporting and directing people towards Black restaurants. What are the issues and the challenges of why you don't see more Black restaurants in publications, fine dining publications, and even local newspapers and publications? Can you speak to that?
Yeah.
I'm trying to tread lightly, but it's an issue.
It's a huge issue.
It's a huge issue. Thank you.
It's a huge issue, and I think there are multiple issues involved. I will say, I can't even remember who I said this to recently. It may have been Anela, but I said something earlier today that my biggest frustration is that the media just never learns their lesson. And I looked at it when the Me Too movement started, and you looked at all these men who had done terrible things in restaurants, and then all of a sudden the media is like, we're going to cover more women. And you'd see 1 or 2 women start to get press coverage, and I would get really frustrated, because I'm thinking to myself, that one woman who you're seeing in the news over and over and over and over again, there are a lot more women doing amazing things in this industry, and you still haven't learned that you are in your echo chamber. So that's one of the problems.
Drop a bomb there. We got applause and we got bombs being, absolutely.
So that's one of the biggest issues.
Yep.
And unfortunately, the same thing happened when, this country had their second big reckoning last summer, is that, there are a lot of great Black owners and Black chefs who are doing wonderful things in this industry, who are deserving of press coverage beyond the 5 that you've chosen to highlight.
Right.
So it's the echo chamber. It's also, I think, an element of laziness that is at play.
Right.
I do also think that it is a question of resources, and I think that a lot of Black-owned restaurants don't necessarily have the resources to afford PR companies as much as others do, because we all know about access to capital and what that looks like for Black restaurants versus non-Black restaurants.
Right.
And so I feel like it just doesn't always become a priority, a top priority, because it can be costly. Right. And for me, I'm the first to also say that I look a little differently at my pricing for my Black-owned clients than I do for those who are not. And it's just, I think that has to change. And I think that there are also a lot of agencies that are not necessarily as open to taking on the projects. They say that they are, but in reality, they are not.
They're not. They're not. Wow. We want to thank you for that. Let's get some applause there again. Yeah, it's, I know that's a whole nother show, but I felt like I needed to at least address it. So let me just do a little commercial here for EatOkra again before we drop it. I need you to think about, we have probably 20 more minutes before we wrap up. So I need you to think about some last nuggets of wisdom that you want to leave our viewers with. But again, if you are a Black-owned restaurant, get listed at EatOkra, the app. If you have any questions about your existing EatOkra membership or how to become a member, you can email Kevin at EatOkra. That is Kevin at EatOkra. Kevin Edwards is our customer success manager. And we also want to encourage you to go back and look at previous webinars that we've done. So make sure you become a subscriber on the EatOkra YouTube page, YouTube channel. And then you could also go back and watch the fabulous Anela Malik that we had on last night, or any of the other industry experts that we had on over the last couple of weeks, and we'll continue to produce this type of knowledgeable, educational information going forward. So, all right, Charissa, you're dropping a lot of bombs of knowledge. So one thing that we haven't talked about is budget. So, let's give people an idea of how much they need to budget. And let me set it up by saying, I think for those restaurateurs out there, I think COVID really revealed some things that were systemically unsustainable with the restaurant industry. And many Black-owned restaurants was not utilizing technology enough. They weren't looking ahead enough. And nor were they looking at the importance of marketing and public relations. And don't look at it as an expense. So if she's about to tell you, you get sticker shock and you say, but it's an investment. It's an investment that will give you a return on your investment. And you just have to look at it that way. So without any further ado, now that I teed you up there, Charissa, let's tell them the important, let's talk about budget. It's going to cost you, yes. Yeah. However, it's not an expense per se. It's an investment that will give you a return in many different ways. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I think I may have said expense earlier, and you're right. Good, I stand corrected. It's an investment, and I think it's hard to sort of throw out numbers because a lot of it will look different depending on the size of your restaurant, right. Or your business or your food truck. I think a lot of it's also going to differ based on how many meal periods are you putting out there, and sort of what's your volume of business. What are all these things that we could be promoting, right? Mm-hmm. And so it is going to look different. But, again, I have heard of some astronomical, way out there, crazy retainers. And that is, I think on the one end of the spectrum just feels very, my heart drops when I hear it. But, I've definitely, I think if you can look at a price range being somewhere as low as, I'd say $1,500 a month, for a smaller operation, and then seeing, like I said, I have heard, again, depending, is it a restaurant group that has more than one restaurant underneath its management company? Mm-hmm. Is it, do they have an inn attached to it? I've heard of some crazy prices, like people charging $8,000-$10,000 a month. So it can be a very big range depending, again, on your size. Mm-hmm. And I think that there are creative ways that you can look into some of these things, right? So it's like if you decide that is an investment that you may not be fully committed to at this point, like you could certainly work with people to like help you flesh out a press kit, right? So if you hire someone just to like, here, develop my press kit for me, or do the tools that I need to, write a solid bio and a solid fact sheet, and help me sort of organize some photos, you can definitely do some of that. You can find, I think, some smart, savvy interns who might be able to, come on for a spring or summer period to help you develop some of that.
Right.
So, it's going to look different depending on what you're doing.
Got it. So if I said $500 a month, is that Can you do something for that?
I think
Like, I'm
it
kind
depends on who you talk to.
I got
Yeah.
to start somewhere, right? So
Yeah.
because 6-month period of time, that's $3,000, right? So
Yeah.
I know, but I need to also be able to quantify the return on that investment some way, somehow.
And
So
that's always the hardest thing
that's
for PR people, right?
yeah,
Because, I think with advertising, you can always, depending on your mode of it, you can often track what does well and sort of track some sales back to it. But PR, again, is hard to put a dollar sign to some of these things, right?
yeah,
Because I always like to say, if I could poll every person that goes into my clients' restaurants and ask, why are you here tonight? What inspired your decision to show up here? That would help. But a lot of that is anecdotal. It's like back in the day, if Tom Seatsma, our local critic, must have, if he wrote about your restaurant in the Washington Post magazine, you'd have people walk in with like a copy of their magazine and like, he told me I should eat this. That shows you, okay, well, PR works. But I think one tool to that is often underutilized is that if restaurants can, have, if you have sort of smart Google Analytics and you can understand on the back end of your website what is directing traffic to your website, that's often helpful. When I worked at Kimpton, I was able to get into a lot of websites, and some of our clients are doing a better job of this now, where they're able to say, hey, this article in this publication really sent a lot of people to our website. And that's always helpful information to know.
Right.
So if you do work with a PR agency, or if you realize that you're getting more press, take a look on the back end if you can to see what your referring sites are, because that will be helpful to know where you want to try and target to make sure that more of those kinds of stories are working for you.
Got it. Last night we had another super bad sister on here, Anela Malik. And is there any type of, do you guys work together? So let's overlap what your services are and her services are. Do you guys ever collaborate? And if I'm a restaurateur, who should I call first? Or do I call one of you and then you engage the other? Because you both are...
I've worked with Anela before, and I think she's wonderful. I think everything that she has done, particularly in this region, has really just helped to lift up so many voices in this community. And I'm grateful that she is here in DC. I don't look at our businesses as competing at all. I look at them as very collaborative.
Right.
A lot of our clients have worked with Anela in terms of, sending samples. And, I think that she is sort of always on the cusp of just sort of staying on top of trends, and is just a voice that people want to hear from, in that very authentic way. So a lot of what we do is definitely complementary.
Right. I see that.
I think I saw another chat question come through. Contact information. I don't know. I know I put together like a sort of quick cheat sheet of some PR tools and resources that might be helpful. I think those will come out afterwards. One thing that I will sort of touch on, if you'll allow for me to do that, is a kind of a fun project that we used to do when we were at Kimpton, was a lot, it sort of centered around trend watching. And, I think it's really important to sort of understand what are the trends that are helping to move news coverage, particularly in the world of food and local businesses. And, it's so important. We don't all have time to read the newspaper or, scroll through our feed of online news resources, but it's important to dedicate some time to doing it a couple times a week, and just sort of understanding what are our local writers writing about, what are they covering, and what are some of the things that we could be doing that would be of interest to them. And so one of the, a fun exercise we used to do with a lot of restaurant managers, would put them in groups. This was way old school, but we would have different sections of the newspaper, and we would give them everything from sports to health to travel to food, and we'd say, read the headlines and sort of think through what are some of the interesting promotions or things that you could be doing at your restaurant that would make for an interesting story.
Right.
And so, you'd have people who would come up with really interesting, I don't know, like World Cup beer packages, or, again, like a Mother's Day promotion in the hotel suite, or whatever it may be. But you just sort of get your brains going for, I don't know if, again, how many people are in DC or not, but, today there was a local organization that is giving out joints for vaccines today, on 420. So again, it's kind of like, all right, do I want someone to show up with their "I got vaccinated" sticker, and then like, here, you can get, a complimentary glass of wine, or,
Right.
a dessert, or whatever it might be.
Got you. So, and I just want to speak to the restaurateurs out there. This is a new day. This is a new time. And we have to think about bringing on the hired professionals that you need. And again, COVID, I've been in the restaurant industry 35 years. And, I've had both black and white clients. And I've seen the difference in the mentalities and the thought processes and the resources. So a lot of times the resources are really not there. The capital is not there. The cash flow is not there. But you have to put these things into your budget. And I know we're coming out of this COVID environment, but you have to, going forward in a post-COVID world, you have to put Charissa Benjamin in your budget. You have to put Anela Malik in your budget. You have to put these hired guns in your budget, because they're the ones that's going to make you or break you in terms of the differentiation between your competitors and the rest of the market. So I really want to, I'm hoping that the restaurateurs and the food truck operators and the caterers and everyone that's listening to us really understand the importance of a Charissa Benjamin and PR and marketing and all those types of things, because it's money well invested. It's not an expense, it's an investment. So, Kevin, go ahead. You want to say something? I see it.
No, I saw a question come
Okay,
through.
yeah, I was just going to say, any questions in the chat?
Yeah. So this is a great one. It says, from Anonymous, what are tips for struggling food businesses who don't have the budget for PR but would like to pitch media? So I would say, going back to a point earlier, read your local news and understand and learn who are the local writers. What are they covering? What are they writing about? And think about, from your perspective, what is unique about my story that would be interesting for them to cover. I would think about, when you think about pitching media, try and build out a media list if you can. This is sort of like going into some of the nuts and bolts of just sort of, elbow grease PR, but, put together a list of some media contacts who are writing about food and local business in your community. And then, it's a tough one, but think about what is unique about your business and what is differentiating you from others. It's a hard one, because I think we all get very passionate about our businesses. Mm-hmm. But journalists are sort of salty, cranky people. And I mean, a lot of it is, why should I care? And why should my readers care? Which I think is sort of like, it's sometimes like a harsh question to think about, but, really think long and hard about what is unique about your brand story that you can tell. And, when you're pitching media, keep it short, keep it to the point. They get 1 million pitches a day from a ton of different people. They are more likely to respond to the ones who come from people who they know. So if you cold email them, they're not as likely to look at it as quickly if they may not have a relationship with you. So make sure that it is succinct, it's to the point, and you get to it quickly, so that you can catch their attention.
Your relationship with them is part of your value, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. I would definitely say that, we've built relationships with a lot of media contacts over the years, and sort of, have them, some on speed dial more than others. Right. Anela made a really good point to also follow journalists on Twitter. a lot of them do, you definitely get a sense of what they're writing about because a lot of them are tweeting their stories. Follow them on Instagram as well, so to see where are they dining, what if they're active posters, where are they eating, and a lot of journalists, some more than others, will put out tweets of, hey, I'm working on a story about X. Do you have any good leads for me? My DMs are open, and then you can always, send them a message, a private message on Twitter and pitch something that may be relevant for you.
Got it. Kev, any other questions in the chat?
Yeah, we have another one from Alicia. Is it a good idea to put that you are a Black-owned female business, or should you focus on the product offerings?
So I think that this goes back to sort of your personal preference. For me, I feel like for my Black-owned business clients, I'm like, you should. I feel like we are at a point in time where we should not be holding back. In a way, I kind of, and I'll be the first to say I'm a little bit bitter at some of the press coverage that comes out. So I'm kind of like, you can put up your black square and forget about us, but I'm going to keep reminding you. So I think that for me, I personally encourage my clients to, but at the end of the day, it's down to your comfort level. So if it's something that you don't necessarily want to put out there, then don't put out there what's not comfortable for you. Because I think Anela touched on this last night.
I was just going to say that. She said the same the last night. Go ahead.
The crazies can come out.
They can come after you. Stand behind yourself, right? Be ready.
There's that. Most of my clients haven't had a lot of trouble. They've had some cranky people who will say things of like, well, would you say the same thing if I said, support white-owned businesses? And I'm just like, yeah, I ain't gonna engage with that. Just y'all go. But right. It's, again, you just have to be ready for it because it could come.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I just saw another message from Crystal here. Any advice how a business owner themselves can build a relationship with food journalists and writers? Yes. I think, again, following on social media, engaging with them there if they seem very active on social media. But then also, just again, sending out a cold email, again, being succinct, get to the point, tell a little bit of your story, who you are, and ask, like, are you okay if I reach out to you occasionally with updates from my business? If I have a new menu that I'm dropping, or if I'm doing an interesting event or promotion or pop-up, would you be okay with me being in touch? The one thing I will say, and this is also, it sounds a little harsh, but journalists are not your friends. And, I've seen some clients who are like, oh, well, such and such reached out to me and we just had such a nice interview. We became really friendly. And, I just opened up so much on the phone. I'm like, that could be a tactic. And don't forget that you're always on the record, even though you say that you're not. And so I will say that you can be friendly with journalists, but at the end of the day, and I will also say this is food writing. So it's not like it's investigative journalism where all of a sudden you're going to get called out for the century's biggest scandal. But at the same time, like, just remember that their job is reporting. And they're not, just because they're friendly with you doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to be kind with their coverage. Right.
No, absolutely. And that's what I was alluding to earlier when I said, you really can't control what happens from the PRs, when that story actually drops. You never know where they're going to twist it. Any final parts, any final, jewels of wisdom that you want to impart on the listeners to have it top of their mind as they leave here this evening?
Yeah, I'd say that one thing I didn't touch on a little bit was, before I go on to some more pearls of wisdom, is TV. If you do have a TV opportunity that comes for you, just remember and understand that TV moves very quickly. So if you have an opportunity to go on air, And they'll tell you it's, 3 minutes. That's an eternity in TV world. And so just if you have a chance to do that and you're not working with someone to help you get there, know that it moves very fast and to be as prepared as possible. If they're coming into your restaurant, that's a little bit different. But if you're going in studio in a post-COVID world where TV studios are allowing more chefs and restaurants to come into the studio, know that a lot of them, especially in this area, are not set up with fully equipped kitchens. So go and take in as much as you can, because you kind of have a bare table. So bring in as much branding for your restaurant if you can, whether it's like takeout bags or, an apron that you can wear, a sign if you have a tabletop sign, and always ensure that you bring a finally prepared dish, because that you never really have enough time to prep the whole thing. So that's just, I know you asked a little bit about TV, so that would just be one
Right.
tip
Yeah.
that I would give for that. Sorry, before words of wisdom, there's one other question from Crystal here. Advice on how many times you should drop cold emails, or any advice how to modify your pitch to make it more intriguing. So I feel like I had a conversation about this earlier too. How many times to drop a cold email? We are in a world right now where it feels like people are taking longer to respond than they would before. And I don't know if it's just everybody's burnt out by COVID and too much screen time in general. My rule of thumb personally is I'll follow up, 2 to 3 times maximum. Don't follow up every 24 hours. Give it a couple of days in between. Journalists do not like to be pestered within 24-hour time periods. So I would, I think 2 to 3 times is fair. If they don't respond after the third try, they're either not interested or terribly disorganized, and would be terrible to work with anyway. So that can be your bright spot. In terms of how to make your pitch more intriguing, again, I can't sort of underscore enough the importance of just sort of like reading what the coverage is, and really thinking long and hard, why should they care? I will also be the first to say, my email was shared here. If you feel like, hey, I want to pitch this story, or do you think it would be interesting to a journalist? I am happy if you want to shoot me a quick message. I am happy to say, hey, I'll look at it quickly and say, this could be a story, or this would need work. So, or, take a little bit of a different look at it, to see if it could be worth their time.
Got it. You want to share any contact information with our listeners and viewers?
Yes, I think Kevin shared it earlier, and I will put it in the chat right here.
Okay.
But my email is the best way to get to me. I'm constantly tethered to it. So,
Okay. I have one final question.
yeah.
Intellectual property. I'm a restaurateur. I have a book, or I want to write a book. Do you handle PR for those individuals that want to push a book or to publish a book, or any other type of intellectual property?
Yeah. So I will say that books are a very different world. In a previous life, when I worked at a very well-funded big agency, I worked on a book launch once with HarperCollins. It's a different world. Publishing looks different now than it did then. There's a lot of self-publishing that's happening, or there's a lot of publishing with very limited marketing budgets that's happening. We have certainly worked on some of these projects before. We're about to start working on a different one that is quite similar. It looks different.
Okay.
It can be tricky because a lot of people are publishing books right now. And so again, I think it's why this book, why now, what makes it unique, what makes it different. But I think it's also an opportunity where you can create, different events and chances to promote yourself tied to that book. People don't necessarily do book tours anymore, but you kind of can, right? Especially in the virtual world. And so they're definitely, I think a lot of things that you can do that are fun around it. But, you can definitely reach out to a lot of the typical food writers, but, the cookbook and book writing publishing world is a little bit bigger.
Same price budget structure as before. $1,500 will get me some PR for my book.
Yeah, and I would say that it
6 month
also looks
period.
different because there's some finality to it, right?
Right.
Like hopefully your book is gonna go into many printings, but it's also it could be viewed as a short-term project
Right.
versus like sign me up for life.
Right, got you. Love it. All right.
Any advice on whether it's good to blog? Sorry, Donna.
No, this is good. Let's rock. This is great.
Yeah, so I mean, I think when it comes to blogging, Anela can probably chime in on this too, because she's like the queen of blogging, but I feel like blogging is something that you should really only focus on doing if you have the time to dedicate to it, to do it well, and to do it consistently. I think a lot of people have these ideas of like, oh, I want to blog, and then they do one like every 6 months. And at that point, it loses any luster. So I think consistency is key. I think having something smart and interesting to say and informative to say is really important. And I wouldn't view it differently than like how we approach pitching, long lead magazines. I would create an editorial calendar for yourself, where if you're going to say, I'm going to commit to blogging once a month, like have a plan and figure out these are the topics that I want to be covering. December, I'm going to be covering holidays. January, I'm going to be covering New Year resolutions, whatever it may be. But think about sort of the smart ways that you can be organized around it.
Got it. Wow. Powerful show. Let's get some applause, please. I want to thank our guest, Charissa Benjamin, for her time, her knowledge, her expertise. I want you to join us next Monday for our final April session with session 4 with how to make Uber Eats work for you. Again, I want to thank our partners, PepsiCo, Uber Eats, Dashable.com, and Apple Guides, our collaboratory Apple Guides. I want to thank our co-founders, Janique and Anthony Edwards Jr. Let's get some applause. Joshua Sharp, Brittany Harris, Kira Houston, Naja Aziz, and Kevin Edwards. My name is Jason Wallace. I thank you, and until we meet again, power to the people.